The title of this evening's Dharma talk is What's to Blame? What's to blame? You could say who's to blame, but let's for a little while, let's just use what is to blame? Something is wrong. And instead of, as you've heard me say over and over again, instead of looking at that, we immediately, if we can find anything to hook it on, blame it on, pin it on, as they say, we'll do it. We'll abandon what is there. And it is interesting to discover, and this is possible for you to do, that whatever is showing up, though there may be a cause or a apparent something to blame, or apparent description of something that would show that this happened, that happened, and this happened, and that's why this is happening. So we think just because we can elaborate on that and somehow stitch it all together, we can problem solved, or we're not, at least now we know what it is and who did it and why it happened, and perhaps even what we could do about that. But it is something we do all the time. We blame others, the same. We blame ourselves. We blame situations, and sometimes it just looks so obvious we don't even think. I was going to say give it a second thought. We might give it second thoughts, but we also give it third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, lots of thoughts about, and the illusion of getting somewhere, of making progress. But this is what the ego mind feeds on. It feeds on descriptions about activities that show up as some kind of justification or reason for how we think a certain way, how we feel a certain way, and so on. Continuous elaborations about everything. And there's no way to stop that. I'm not suggesting that, even though I say don't do that, or don't blame, or don't believe your thoughts, or don't believe your emotions. Don't put too much credibility in there. Other than the actual experience of it has its own reality, but it's there's a word that the Tibetans use sometimes to help point us to a deeper understanding of dependent origination. And it basically says that everything is self-existing. And it sounds like, well, that's just going against dependent origination. That's going in another direction. But what it's saying is everything has its own. It's kind of an odd kind of independence. That is, though it is part of everything, it is not separate from anything. The part that makes it so difficult for us is that it looks so separate. And there's something very accurate about that, in that it is self-existing. It is completely unconnected with everything. It is the singular appearance of something that is hidden until something shows up. And that is representative of everything else that is in the dark temporarily. So it's difficult to elaborate on that in such a way that, we can, yeah, I hadn't noticed that before. Thank you for filling me in on that. I think it's something that is very subtle, because it partakes of that aspect of your mind that we would call intuition or insight, and that aspect of the mind that functions out of structures, conceptualization, analysis, logic, and all that. It takes a little bit from each. We tend to break those up into insight over here, whatever, guesswork even. I think that looks like that might be, that could be, and then logic, which has the building blocks are all the same size or same shape and fit together in a certain way. And there might be a lot of them. We might be very good at that. We might be a logician, perhaps. So the idea was saying, what is to blame, or what's to blame? The idea behind selecting that as a topic is the what part of that question is pretty good. Anytime you say what, there is enough directness in what is happening in consciousness to not necessarily move you off from center into something else. It has a quality, that kind of an inquiry, that kind of investigation is direct enough that you can actually do that if you have some mindful training where you are not looking for something else, where you actually understand, simply put, I'm supposed to look at this. Not, I'm supposed to look at this for a little while till I see that's not going anywhere, and then I'll look at for something else. Sometimes called impatience. Thinking that, well, if I'm looking right at this, shouldn't something appear that makes sense, or should there be some kind of progress happening? This is where ego, or the narcissism, and the self-centeredness gets its fuel from, in order to perpetuate the illusion of someone who's going somewhere and who's been somewhere and is now over here, is getting better, getting worse, and so on. And of course, that is aligned with all the other causes and conditions and variables that are countless. I mean, to say countless is an incredible understatement. It's a huge elaboration. But if I say don't blame, don't sometimes I say you don't have to forgive. Just don't blame. If you see that you're blaming, and you sometimes people think, well, we need to go forgive, or we need to apologize. Well, you might need to apologize a little bit. A little bit is okay. But quite often we make a big deal out of, well, we even could continue to give ourselves kind of credit. Well, I blamed them for a long time, and then I just decided to just forgive them. And it's might be okay, but it's more of the wonderful person that has forgiven someone. So it's more of self-centeredness, just highly sophisticated, and kind of gets a pass. So, but when you say what is to blame, then you'll go right into the obvious thing. Well, what is to blame? Well, he is, she is, they are, the situation is. Well, this whole structure, it's not just one person, it's 8 people or 10, or it's the whole situation that one is entrained or hypnotized by, which is sometimes called the system, whatever that system may be. That's just the way we do things here. Sometimes if we're able to pin the tail on the donkey, so to speak, we can kind of back, okay, well, we know what the issue is, we know how to handle that. And so sometimes that relative situation it works enough so that we think that's all we need to do is you just need to figure it out, calculate it, figure it out. And the difficulty there is it works a little bit, but it doesn't work enough to keep you from falling into the trap of whatever it may be: materialism, psychological materialism, cultural materialism, spiritual materialism, and all the other materialisms that are about getting something, about fulfilling, having a craving, and there's a desire, a wish for something else, or something better, something stronger, something smarter, something more beautiful, something more concrete, dependable. One of the sayings in Buddha's Dharma, I don't know what the fundamental source is, but it shows up everywhere else, is all dharmas, all truths, or all laws, or all, even the dharma of water being wet, or the dharma of fish being slippery, or the dharma of like the ikebana is of flowers pointing towards the sky. No, that's the roots. Odd kind of flowers. Really beautiful. But there's a dharma of that. In Ikebana, there's a heaven, earth, and man. There's the earth aspect, the solid bottom. In this case, the container, and an aspect of the way the leaves are shaped. Some kind of anchoring or heavy visual gravitas that is there. And then there's that part that is reaching up, kind of the idealism or reaching towards the heaven or towards the aspiration area of space. That's in this case the roots are doing it. So it's kind of a interesting um, commentary on those the roots pointing towards heaven. But it's doing it, and it's very successful. And I don't know who did that, but if I knew, I'd probably compliment them. But since this is a Dharma talk, I usually don't compliment them. Yes, June Chu did that. She did a really good job. She did that one too. Go ahead, take it away. It's a great job. And so the idea there, using those three forms, Shinsoi, Ikai, are the Japanese words, and I don't know which is which. But I'd say that. So the anchoring part, and then the reaching, the aspiration part. And so you have heaven and earth, and then there's man or woman. You have the human consciousness there, and the idea that heaven and man are, or heaven and earth are brought together by this consciousness. That's how the metaphor works. Heaven and earth joins heaven. The enlightened being joins heaven and earth. Just a way of talking about it. So you wouldn't say, well, you saw a beautiful piece of art, whether it was a ikebana or a beautiful piece of music, something someone had composed or something someone's performing or singing. You can't really say what's the blame for that? What's the cause? You can't find a direct cause because you'd have to go back to, if it was a musician or the composer, you'd have to go back to all the training they've had. You'd have to go back to their mother and their father getting together the exact time to produce such a person that was able to even bring together those elements in such a way. And heaven, earth, and man would apply to any of the arts, including music. Pardon my voice stumbling. It's been happening for the last few hours. Tripping over my consonants. So the what's to blame? What's to blame? The what part is, you could stop with that. As soon as you say what, stop right there. You don't really have to go what's to blame and actually look away from what. You could actually take the what part, because the actual situation is the result of its own presence. Just to break it down a little bit. So things are fundamentally what they are. It's not very helpful to the materialistic mind that wants some kind of damn results. Why is this happening? And the same thing happens in our mind when we have disturbing thoughts or emotions. Difficult, because we want some kind of answer. There must be something I can do. How can I work with this? What can I do? Must be something I can do. And because of the nature of confusion and the nature of the poisons and the nature of consciousness and the nature of grasping it at itself, that quite often the whole situation there's too much of an extended labyrinth of cause and effect, 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 that you can't find the tail of that to unravel it, because it is operating on so much. You could say, not to avoid looking at it, but you could say that it's just really, really complicated in terms of the pushing and pulling aspect of it. Some of it shows up. We try to use that and manipulate it. Some areas, there seems to be some kind of progress we're making, working with that. This is why it's if you study any of the different forms that are very conceptual and use concepts, but also it's more of an artistic grasping or understanding, or you could say blaming, if you wanted to. The Enneagram, also astrology, which depends on the understanding of cyclic movement, has something there, but the idea that you're going to conclude something there is elusive. It's just by its very nature that you will get a relative solution, but you'll notice you can't actually apply that to anything. You just have it's like the astrology is like the feeling of knowing. Enneagram or tarot cards or any of those. You could go on and on. The I Ching, casting the I Ching to find out what the future has in store. I'm not against any of those. I think they're wonderful. But the understanding that we really are looking for, the fundamental understanding that will lay to rest the urgent grasping warfare of ego and the sometimes raging energy of the three poisons in different levels with different ways and different people and different communities and different cultures and in different times. Sometimes it gets so incredibly strong in certain areas that suffering is very intense. And so you heard me say over and over again, not a lot we can do out in that direction, but you can take that aspect of this world, which you have some say-so about, and slow it down, hold still, and watch the movement of the mind, and get to know your mind so that you can understand for yourself the very nature of cause and effect, and see the polarities, like praise and blame is a good one. Somebody gets credit, somebody gets blamed. So I'd like to have some questions of that.
Going back to the Ikebana.
Ikebana?
Is there those three, earth,
Heaven, earth.
heaven, earth, man, are those three present in the spiritual path?
They're everywhere. It's just a way of talking about how things are arranged. So yes, they're all over the place.
How would those show up on the spiritual path? How would they be differentiated?
Do you use those principles when you're doing Ikebana, or you just do it visually?
Kind of.
So you kind of do it with a capital K?
Yeah.
Oh, kind of, sort of. Okay, so you reflect on the weightiness of it, and then upward motion in some kind of something that seems to address both at the same time in a way. Would you say it that way, or would you say it a different way?
I guess for me it's more spatial, like just need something kind of going in three different directions.
Yeah, well, simply put, there's the cushion, and there's your butt, and here's your mind. So sit down, heaven, earth, and man. So the earth is your cushion, and you're the person, and mind is that aspect of the mind that is formless. So you bring that together on the cushion. That's why it's so important to just observe, just receive what is happening, rather than abandon what is here, what is present, and go into some kind of a, without even a search warrant. You're looking at rummaging around for this and that. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Go ahead.
When heaven and earth are brought together, is something else created?
It is a kind of participation that is happening, where you are no longer getting in the way of equanimity with some kind of personal choice about this needs to be, that shouldn't be, I'm not getting enough of this, I need more of that. The constant messing around with everything, trying to squeeze some kind of happiness out of whatever is showing up. So the balance of the equanimity, or upeksha is the Sanskrit, which I'm sure you've heard, that balance is already the case. And it is like this balance is already the case. And what you're doing is you're looking at the elements, and you're you're receiving the disparity that's happening, like the root that's up in the air lays on the tabletop, and then the flowers are off together, and maybe a branch, and then the metal urn that leaks. Isn't it some leaks, isn't it? Yeah, and it was definite. It was on purpose, right? Leaking urn. So you would bring those together with and some kind of equanimity or balance or harmony would start to show up just within those. And it's true. It's true in music. It's true in the arts. Some people gravitate more towards one particular way than another. Some people do that with words, and like haiku is a good example of something that has several parts to it that function that way. And they function not only with the meaning of the word, but they also function with the shape, the way the words are shaped on the page. More?
If we're constantly trying to create the balance, how do we see that it's already there?
Just watch the struggle. So this is why we have such a strong form, and our particular way of working with the mind is we come in, we have a time, we have a form, we strike a bell, we sit down, we sit there for an hour, whatever time we have made, and we, insofar as we can, we just receive. There's nothing to look for. There's just, you could say you're just there. You just sit there and you watch what moves, and what will move, generally and specifically, is the qualities of the mind that are distressed or that are looking for something else. Want something else. They want to blame something, or they want to credit something. They want some kind of relative value out of everything. And this is propelled by hope and fear, the hope that I can get what I want, and the fear that I won't get what I want. You're getting caught between those two aspects of the three poisons: hoping and fearing, or passion and aggression.
Is the struggle itself balanced?
I think it has a quality of balance in it that one may have to see. It's not showing up as an expression of balance. It's like a stage set that keeps falling over. So it's set up and it's set up, and then it falls over. And then we set. It's like when the person comes to the cushion and thinks it's something different every time. I'm sure you know what I'm saying. It feels like every time you come to the cushion, it goes a little bit this, then it's this way, and then it goes into where it's always the same, gets very boring, and then that changes and goes into something else. There's always some kind of a shifting that is going on that has to do with our particular form or our style of just refusing, to put it bluntly, refusing your Buddha nature, refusing that fundamental equanimity that is always the case. It's always been here. It was here before you got here, and it's not. And you're not separate from that. Even if there was a human form who lives for so many years and has different things happen in their life, still the fundamental situation is perfect, as is said in the Dzogchen tradition, the great perfection. True.
If we have an agenda, are we failing to bring heaven and earth together?
Not necessarily. The idea of an agenda, it's like, you would say it this way. You would say it's not too tight, not too loose. Somewhat of an agenda, but no demand. So let's an agenda. Let's move this way. This should be longer. This could be a little bit shorter. And that's too short. So but one that is very respectful of the forms and no demand. No demand. And this doesn't mean that if you do that and you just have spend time on it, and you have using Ikebana again, you have something that just doesn't click. It seems you can't quite get the energy there using those principles of heaven, earth, and man. You can't quite get that to come together in a way that works. So you can't find the qualities in each one that come together that seem to be just a natural cooperation. So there's a little agenda there. Yes, I knew. Did you just pull that pencil out of the air? Yeah. Further questions? It's a good area for questions if you have them. Suzanne?
If the demand is showing up, is that dependently arisen?
Anything that's showing up is dependently arisen. So yes.
So is it enough to receive the demand? Or
If you're just look at it. You wouldn't necessarily add on to it more layers of, oh, that's terrible, that keeps happening. Why does that keep happening? I'm trying to be aware of that, but I keep some little eddies of discursive thought that go around that keep us distracted from what's right in front of us, which is we're not separate from. So
so if the demand sticks around, we just have to sit with the discomfort?
Well, I think it's different for each person. So some people, that might be a good approach to take. To actually say to themselves, I feel uncomfortable, but I'm just going to stay with it. But another person, because of the quality of the frustration or the difficulty or the connection they have with the teaching conceptually, or even the connection they have with the community, or the connection they have with the teacher. If any of those three are even there, those three are not there, it's going to be very difficult for any person to understand that the way you work with negativity is just look at it, because it doesn't seem to be like there's going to be much of a payoff there. And if it were true that things were not dependently arisen, that there was some kind of separation, and you could be somebody, you could get somewhere, the power of positive thinking and all that stuff, then you actually were an ongoing solid being who could accomplish things. Might be a different story, but that's untrue. That's the relative truth is relatively true. And even that only goes so far. It starts to flip over and be the mirror image of that, be something else again. Whereas seeing what this is, you actually see what it is. There's no more warfare. Even if war shows up, you don't choose sides. Misunderstand me, this doesn't mean that you don't vote. You would still do that. You would still relate to the situation, to the world, the culture, the society, the family, brother and sister, the Sangha, as it is. You would relate to it as it is, but you wouldn't think about it and whether you're going to side with it or not, or whether you're going to go another direction. That's why when somebody, they say they want to ordain to receive Dukkha, are you sure? I try to back them up as much as I can. Do anything else you have to. But it makes it too confusing to go into something and then back out of it. I'm not saying that you're going to have another lifetime or you're not going to have another chance or something like that, something silly. But there's an old saying that goes probably pre-Buddhist, but keep your agreements. If you make an agreement, keep it. Otherwise, why make the agreement? And if the causes and conditions arrive in such a way that they just change the whole thing, then we wouldn't fight with that either. Causes and conditions change. Please.
Question on YouTube from Bjarku.
Who?
Bjarku,
How do you spell that?
Bjarku.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm struggling between the shikantaza that I have always practiced and the closed eye, counting breath, and general awareness I've been doing lately. Any advice?
Yeah, stop doing that. Just do Sokuzan. You don't even have to use the word Sokuzan. Don't call it anything. Call it fancy pants. Just sit down. Think about this for a minute. I'm going to show you. I'm not going to get off this. This is too comfortable. But hold still. Sit symmetrical. It can be this way. It could be this way. Sit very symmetrical. And just insofar as you can, watch whatever is happening in the mind stream, the eye stream, the nose stream, all the sense fields. Watch what's moving, and it'll kind of be entertaining. Things change, and then it flattens out, and then it comes back, and comes and goes, and comes and goes. Just observe that. Whereas if you're doing shamatha, vipassana, lakton, shine, and those kinds of manipulative practices, I'm not against that. So you need to have some kind of a qualifier. So if you want to do that, you're asking me, so I get to tell you. But if somebody is doing that in practice, I wouldn't say, should I be doing that? I said, I don't know. What do you think? I said, well, I really like doing shine, and I like counting my breaths. I said, well, then continue, keep doing it. But to respond to that question more directly, I would say that since you're kind of somewhat back and forth, my recommendation is to do, and I've done a lot of both. My recommendation is simpler is better. A radical meditation where you're not trying to get somewhere else. And I'm not saying that couldn't help you stabilize somewhat, but that kind of shine and lakton or shamatha vipassana, mindfulness awareness should come out of your practice rather than something you're doing to yourself, or rather than some teachers telling you, even if they have a lot of credentials, that, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, no matter what it is. Oh, you should decide. I mean, if there's any decision at all. But I would start out by doing it very, very simply. Sit down, hold still. This isn't even, it has the name Shikataza or just precisely this, but even that might be a little extra. Might be just precisely nothing at all. Just the reason it's not ho hum is you're holding your body straight. So that way, if the body is held straight without pushing and without struggling, and this doesn't mean after 20 minutes, if you're sore, you don't bend over and stretch your back a little bit. Don't do the macho thing. That's because haven't been enough women involved in this. Really, not enough feminine energy, mostly masculine control. And it's not been helpful. It probably has protected the lineage over a couple thousand years, the masculine force of it, because there's so much militancy in the form. So maybe that was a way of protecting it. So, but I will also say to this person, how is it Bjarko? Bjarku. I would also say to you that you decide what you're. I don't know you, so if you have a teacher, and you're giving your teacher the benefit of the doubt, do what he says or she says or they say. Do that. But since you're asking me for the next 3 minutes or whatever it may be, I'm functioning as your teacher, and I would say do Shikantaza. I've taught. I was trained how to teach the kind that you do in 1978, and I taught it for decades. I don't teach it anymore, not because it's wrong. It's just because I think it's a good idea with the people that I meet to just do it as directly as possible rather than try to train the mind to be open. Let's just look at the way the mind is closed. Because if you're training it to do something, it's like well, it's not like a cat because you can't train those, but it's like you can't train those either. Let's see. What can you train? Porpoises? Sea lions. Okay, so it's like a sea lion. You can, for a while, you eventually can train them. And if you just want to be a trained person, then do shamatha vipassana or lakton shine, and eventually you will be a pretty good meditator. But you will not realize your true nature, I don't think. I could be wrong. I probably am wrong. I probably am totally full of it. So trust yourself. But you could consider what I'm saying. And the way in which I would say that, if you do have an interest in doing it that way, you said you used to do Shikantaza. I'd be curious, and I am curious as to whether you did that by reading it out of a book or you had somebody who was teaching you Shikantaza. You had somebody who related to you as your teacher. Because to think, it's very easy to think you're doing Shikantaza when you're actually stirring the pot. What is that old saying? A stirred pot won't fizz? You know that. Oh no, that's a closed pot can't be robbed. Help me here, you guys. Yes,
He has more.
he does. It's a he?
I think so.
Oh,
He says it's Icelandic, his name.
Hmm.
He says, I've been meditating on and off for around 16 years. Some weeks I will meditate 4 hours a day. Other weeks I get lazy and don't meditate at all. How important is consistency?
depends on the person. It depends on, do you have a teacher? You have a sangha. Are you practicing Buddha's dharma? Do you consider yourself a Buddhist, or do you at least consider yourself a student of Buddhism, of this 2,500-year-old tradition, where he's gone and what he got is living teachers, which might not be such a bad idea. But I would say, from what I can tell, if you're practicing that much, I wouldn't interfere with that at all, without your permission. If you ask me what to do, then I would say, keep doing it. But do Shikantaza, so that it's more formless rather than some kind of a stylized structure. And there's so many variables there. I don't know if you've been doing Shikantaza, if you did Shikantaza for 15 years, and just the last year you've been doing Shamatha Vipassana. So I don't really, it'd be quite a bunch of different variables on that. You're asking questions, so that you must not be sure exactly what protocol that you should be working with.
He says, there's no teachers in his part of England. You are his only teacher for the time being. And then he says, I can find Shikantaza somewhat frustrating. I see so many people do it for years, and they don't seem much different than when they started. Zen got me into meditation again, but I don't see results.
It's just a misunderstanding about results. This is all over the place. People get they want results, and finally they just give up and make up some results. And then they tell each other people that's what their results are. It's called a Dharma teacher. Yeah, I'd be really suspicious of that whole area. Right.
You said it's a misunderstanding of results. What would a proper understanding of results be?
No results. No results, no demand, no looking for anything else. What you're looking for, if you listen to me very much, which you may have, I say what you're looking for, you're looking at. You're looking at this. If you're looking for happiness, if you're looking for satisfaction, if you're looking for awakening, if you're looking for clarity, it has it doesn't have a color, it does not have a hue, a fragrance, a texture. It's not separate from everything. But sitting, I would say, the way it sounds to me, I would say sit. It sounds like you sit quite a bit. I say just keep it simple, keep it radical. Just sit down, look at the wall. 2 feet, 3 feet away, look at the wall. Find a sangha, not the person a sangha, but find a community called a sangha, a spiritual community. And then study. You can study with our community. Our community is pretty small. We even have a new group starting over in that part of on a Zoom line. So, but that'd be up to you. I'm not here to sell anything to you.
Sorry, there's a lot coming in. He says he's 31 and he's been Buddhist since he was 14. He learned how to meditate from Dogen's words. not from a teacher. He did Shikantaza from age 19 to 30, and then Vipassana for the last year. He says, teachers always say no results, but we all want awakening and self-realization. I want to know the answer to who am I primarily.
Look at who you're not, and that's difficult. And the other thing I would say, and I'm not here to market myself or this particular community, but I'm very biased in this area because I couldn't have done this without a teacher. When I say done this, I sit up here and presume to help people with their minds. And so I would say that's probably what's missing is the three jewels: the teacher, the teaching, and the Sangha. And quite often the last two, especially the last one, is just not emphasized enough. We really need to work together, and it needs to be and if the teacher is not with the Sangha, needs to be with the Sangha a lot. My teacher was quite often absent from the Sangha. Didn't work too well.
He asks, why did Sokuzan transition from Chogyam Trungpa's Tibetan Buddhism to Zen?
Nobody transitioned. You think I transitioned, but I didn't do anything. I'm still a Shambhalian. I'm still a Zen Buddhist. I'm still practice that. I didn't do anything with it. I still practice Tibetan forms. I practice Zen forms. I haven't gone anywhere. The forms themselves changed around me, the cultural forms and the practice forms with teaching people. My guru passed away in 1987. So that changed things quite a bit. But I didn't leave it. They kind of left me. They found out that I was practicing Zen and told me to stop teaching Shambhala, basically. So I did. But it's pretty hard to just stop teaching something that you feel has a lot of power to it or a lot of help. I just might not call it what they're calling it. I don't present myself as a Shambhala teacher.
Are there specific practices or an energy in Shambhala or Tibetan Buddhism that isn't present in Zen?
No, they're all present. Nothing's left out. I'm saying if you don't practice at all, something's going to be left out. But Zen, even Trungpa Rinpoche, when someone asked him, and people are always asking this kind of questions, asked him, so how about Suzuki Roshi? He was, just a Zen guy. So, and Trungpa Rinpoche said, no, he was a tantric master. Because it's not isn't contained by a form. It's about the fundamental nature of reality as you see it and as you present it if you're functioning as a teacher. So those are Tantra and Vajrayana and Tibetan Buddhism and all the different forms in Tibetan Buddhism are just names and ways of methods of working with the mind. And especially in not only the Zen forms too, because there's a lot of politics. There was tons of politics, especially in the 15th and 16th century between the lineages there. So sometimes they got so wrapped up in who was taking over, and as you may or may not know, that the youngest of the four main lineages, the Gelugpa, head of that is Dalai Lama, and due to I think it was a Mongol emperor, a Mongol army. That's how he was placed as the head of the political head of the country. Tibetan monks didn't do it. Mongols did it. That's my understanding from. I hear that.
You read it in that big book you're reading.
Yeah, I'm reading a really big book.
on Mahamudra.
Makes a great paperweight. Yes. Further questions? Have a little bit of time if there's especially from someone who hasn't asked you a question. Mondo, do you have any questions? Nicole? Pumpkin bread. That's why my blood sugar went out of sight. Pumpkin bread. You be ashamed of yourself.
Don't you think I already am?
You probably are, but I'm the one that ate it. So, but she let me eat it. So, yeah.
I couldn't.
So what does that remind you of? What's
to blame?
Yeah, what's to blame? There's always going to be something. Just sometimes it's more convenient if it's somebody you dislike already. But if it's somebody you really like, it's hard to blame them for it. You notice how you make excuses for them? Is there more questions on YouTube? I see something on you.
Josh from Kalamazoo asks,
Yeah.
the Zendo Buddha shrunk for a while and now appears back to normal. Who is to blame when Buddha nature does this?
Shodo. Yeah, we've been working on things, getting ready for the ceremony, the establishment of the Order of Immediate Light on the 18th. So there'll be some changes here, some different scrolls and so on. So that's what's happening. Different colors of things. But it's actually the same Buddha that's your extreme size subjectivity. You're politically very size conscious. No, what's to blame for that question? Gosh. We had to take him away because we had the altar and Shoto had to work on that. And I know you really don't care. You don't want to know. And so then we put the stone Buddha up there temporary so that we wouldn't be without a reference point. So you guys just bumps on logs over there? There's no questions.
Joke bowing.
There's one of the bumps woke up. Yes. How can I help you, young man?
Earlier you talked about shikantaza and you said that you may think that you're practicing shikantaza and then you may actually be practicing shikantaza. What is the difference between the two?
Describe them again and I'll tell you.
Thinking that you're practicing shikantaza and practicing shikantaza.
If you're practicing shikantaza, you probably will not be much thinking going on. Because if you're just receiving, then it's just the quality of whatever's appearing. But thinking you're practicing shikantaza may show up as some kind of, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to be aware, I'm trying to watch what moves, I'm trying to. And eventually you're just present. If you're fundamentally present, you won't know it. Yes, I did say that. If you know you're present, these are thoughts about being present. I never said this was easy. Certainly it's easy.
Sugar bowing.
Yes.
Would you see a quality of presence as opposed to thinking about one?
I'm not saying that something like that couldn't arise. It's never arisen over here, but I'm not saying that couldn't. It's possible something like that could show up. But I think it's more bankrupt than that. You don't get anything out of it. You're getting something out of it, even though it's very slight. This is spiritual materialism. I'm not saying that doing a sitting meditation won't help you to sit down and maybe not interrupt people quite so much, maybe even listen a little bit more. So there might be a lot of things that show up in that way. Very likely those will show up. But the fundamental, let's call it angst, that one is going through could get stronger at the same time that other people are perceiving you as being a lot more, well, that meditation is really working pretty good for that person because of this and this and this. And we've had other people come and say, I thought you were a meditator. you're pulling your hair out over this, and doesn't that meditation must not work. So, no, and then the proper answer to that, yeah, it won't work for you. Well, why wouldn't it? Because you don't do it. Let them have it. Don't let anybody else look. Final question, if there is one, or Ashoka, if you have another.
So I have another question. When you say that there may be a feeling of angst that gets worse,
Yes.
what is that angst?
So the way you're asking it and the way I would talk about it here, there's a couple different ways, but basically what I would say is that is probably something, if you're doing a lot of sitting practice, that's probably, if that seems to be getting worse, it's probably an aspect of consciousness that has been smothered with conclusions, ideas, opinions, and basic ignorance, and it's starting to break loose. It's like ice melting. You've been able to freeze it up, fixation, attachment, ignorance, and it stays there. But then when we start to do sitting practice, shikantaza, this whole thing starts to get, starts to come apart. The fixation starts to break down. And so what we've been hiding out from, that feeling of insecurity, we've been covering up with convictions and conclusions and opinions and so on, beliefs starts to come apart. So it can be more difficult. This is why having the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, that's why having a strong practice is good and is helpful in that way.
Yes, Sivan, you said a minute ago that if you're doing shikantaza, there won't be a lot of thinking going on. Does that mean a lot of thoughts are coming up on the cushion that we're not doing shikantaza, Don?
No. Further, that response can't be very helpful. I would
Just
like-
going, well, it was the answer I wanted, so
Okay, well, we're good. Yeah.
So what do you mean when you say if you're doing shikantaza, there won't be a lot of thinking going on? What did you mean by that, Don?
Yeah, and so when I say, I'm not saying that you're not endeavoring to do it, to sit down and endeavor to watch what moves. One of the things we can have difficulty with is we can't quite do that. So it can be frustrating. So, and there's different levels of that for each person. And to some people, it opens up in one way, and to other people, it will open up in other ways. So the whole success and failure area starts to come apart, and it starts to get very complicated in that area when you stop meddling with it. That you just watch what occurs, and it has its own combination of things coming and thoughts coming, thoughts going, getting stronger, getting weaker, and just do nothing with it. So even thoughts arising, there can be thoughts arising when you're on the cushion and you're just watching them come and go, and then there's thoughts arising on the cushion that you're actually generating in response to other thoughts that are arising on the cushion. So you're actually kind of mixing it up by adding things on. You can see how that's happening if you can use your other sense fields to ground you, because the mind doesn't obey time and space at all, but your body does. If you're sitting there, you have to sit there. Your knees will fall asleep, or your legs will fall asleep. Your back will get sore. Your eyes might water or something, or there might be noise outside the building. So you can check in, notice that the things are actually happening in what we would call real time, real space, right here and right now. This doesn't apply to the thinking process. It's everywhere, all the time, and anywhere, and is very seductive. I'm sure you know, you can get so wrapped up in certain thoughts about certain things because of fear or hope or whatever it may be, that you just totally blank out on everything that's around you. Totally ignore the other five senses. Not wrong, just ignoring everything.
A question from Bhavani. How will meditation help me to develop paramus? How to dedicate that merit?
Is it paramis?
The word is Paramus. How will meditation help me to develop that?
I don't know. Chisho, do you know, is that a Sanskrit word that you recognize? Chisho doesn't know what it is.
No, I don't know.
Oh, that's probably the South,
Whispering.
South Sea Islanders. Yeah. I don't know. I would have to know what that means.
Paramis. Paramis.
Paramis. But just all they have to do is just tell me what that means, and then I can address it. Say, no, I'm not going to do that. You're the teacher. You should know. Chisho should know. Chisho's to blame.
Yeah. Maybe, but I don't know. But
John Valley.
Yes.
10 paramis are from insight meditation. They are generosity, virtue, renunciation, wisdom, and
Oh.
education.
Oh, paramitas. Same thing as paramitas, or similar. Similar. Okay. And the question was, how will meditation help me to develop those? It may not. It may not. But it can't hurt. Find a teacher. Not me. I'm plenty busy. But find someone, find a teacher, find a community, study it with someone as a community, especially a teacher that has a strong connection with the Sangha. Very important. Okay. You guys missed your chance to ask the $64,000 question.
We'll dedicate the merit.
I can get up.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-ho-san-ji, shi-fu, shi-son-mu-sa-mo-ko-sa. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect SokukoJi Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.